The night Raymond Dalton died, he made his wife promise two things. The first was easy. The second would nearly break her. It was a Thursday in March 11 years ago. The kind of gray afternoon that makes hospital rooms feel even smaller than they are. Maggie sat in the vinyl chair beside his bed, holding his hand the way she'd held it for 43 years. Through three miscarriages. Through the plant closing. Through every hard thing life had thrown at them. Ray's breathing had changed that morning. The nurses knew. Maggie knew. They'd stopped pretending. His eyes opened around 2 in the afternoon. Clear for the first time in days. He turned his head on the pillow and looked at her. Maggie. Just her name. But the way he said it, she knew. I'm here, baby. His fingers tightened around hers. Barely. But she felt it. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll be okay. She tried to smile, failed, nodded instead. Say it, Maggie. I promise I'll be okay. He closed his eyes, opened them again, looking at her like he was memorizing her face. One more thing. What is it, Ray? Promise me you'll keep being you. She didn't understand. Her face must have shown it. The woman who feeds everybody, he said. The woman who sees people, who helps when she's got nothing left to give. His voice was getting weaker. That's who you are, Maggie. Don't let the world take that from you. The machines beeped. Someone walked past in the hallway. Promise me. I promise, baby. I promise. He smiled, actually smiled. Then he closed his eyes and 3 hours later, he was gone. Maggie kept the first promise easy enough. She survived. Got up every morning at 5:15. Made her coffee in the same percolator she'd had since 1989. Fed the 2 stray cats that showed up on her porch one winter and never left. She named them Bishop and Deacon because they showed up on a Sunday, and it made Ray laugh when she told him back when he could still laugh. The second promise was harder. 11 years later, Maggie Dalton lived alone in a 2-bedroom house on a dead-end street called Maple Terrace in Ridgemont, Ohio. Population 3,200 and dropping. The kind of town that used to mean something back when steel mills ran 3 shifts and you could raise a family on an honest wage. The mills closed in 2008. The town died slow after that. Maple Terrace had 12 houses. 5 of them were empty. Boarded windows. Overgrown yards. For sale signs so faded you could barely read the numbers anymore. The 7 houses still occupied held on like survivors of something nobody wanted to name. Maggie's house sat at the very end, the last one on the left before the road turned to gravel and disappeared into scrub pine. Ray had bought it in 1979. 30-year mortgage at 11% interest. He built the back porch himself. Spent 3 summers on it. Every board, every nail his hands. Maggie would bring him iced tea and watch him work, sweat soaking through his shirt sawdust in his hair. She never changed a thing about that porch. Not in 11 years. The wood was weathered now, soft in places, but it was Ray's. Touching it felt like touching him. Inside the house was small but clean. Maggie kept it that way. Not because anyone visited. Nobody did anymore. But because keeping things clean was something she could control when everything else was falling apart. The roof had been leaking since last spring. She had 3 buckets lined up in the attic to catch the drips. Every time it rained, she climbed up there, emptied them, and put them back. The ceiling in the hallway had brown water stains shaped like continents. She'd added a 4th bucket 2 weeks ago. She owed $2,200 on a medical bill from last October. Slipped on the front steps during the first frost. Bruised her hips so bad she couldn't stand. The ambulance came. The ER doctor said nothing was broken, but ran tests anyway. The bill arrived 3 weeks later. She put it in the kitchen drawer and hadn't looked at it since. Opening that drawer made her chest feel tight. Her furnace broke in November. The repair estimate was more than she had, more than she'd have. So she heated the house with a kerosene space heater in the corner of the living room, and the oven door cracked open on low. She wore 2 sweaters and a quilt to bed most nights. Taped plastic sheeting over every window to keep the drafts out. The tape was peeling in the kitchen. She kept pressing it back down. She lived on Social Security, $1,143 a month. That was everything. Groceries, utilities, property tax, the cats. She did the math every month on the back of an envelope. $43 left over if she was careful, 20 if she wasn't. But here's what you need to understand about Margaret Dalton. She never complained, not once. Not to her neighbor Patrice, not to the Fletcher family down the street whose 3 kids she watched after school, not to anyone. It wasn't denial. It was something deeper than that. Maggie believed truly all the way down to her bones that you make do with what you have. And while you're making, do you find a way to help somebody else? That was her code. That was her religion. She watched the Fletcher kids 3 days a week so their mama could pick up a second shift at the warehouse. Didn't charge a dime. The kids would get off the bus at 3:30 and walk to Miss Maggie's house. She'd have peanut butter sandwiches waiting, apple slices, carrot sticks if she had them. She'd help with homework at the kitchen table while they ate. The oldest girl, Keisha, was 7, wanted to be a teacher. Maggie told her she'd be a great one. She left foil-wrapped plates of food on porches when she knew someone was going through it. Didn't knock, didn't wait for a thank you, just left the plate and walked home. Mrs. Patterson 3 doors down, the Hendricks family across the street, the young couple in the corner house with the new baby and no family nearby. Last summer, she organized the only neighborhood cleanup Maple Terrace had seen in years. Printed flyers at the library on the free computer. 6 people showed up. She thanked every single one of them like they'd given her a gift. That was Maggie, invisible to the town council, invisible to the system, forgotten by the church she'd attended for 40 years after what merged with a parish 25 minutes away, and she couldn't make the drive in winter. She didn't have internet, didn't have a cell phone plan with data, had a landline, a radio, and a TV with 3 channels that came in clear if you adjusted the antenna. But she had something most people don't. She had a kind of grace that doesn't ask for anything back. She told the Fletcher kids once while they were eating peanut butter sandwiches at her table, "You don't have to have a lot to give a lot." She meant every word. But there were moments alone in her house when the weight of it all pressed down so hard she could barely breathe, like the Sunday before the storm. The old church on Brewster Street had been locked for 2 years, merged with St. Catherine's out past the highway. Too far for Maggie to get to without a car. Too expensive to keep both buildings open. But the door didn't lock right. Maggie knew that. She'd slipped inside a few times when she needed to sit in the quiet. That Sunday, she sat in the 3rd pew on the left, the same pew she'd sat in for 4 decades. The light came through the stained glass in colors that didn't exist anywhere else. Reds and blues and golds that made the dust in the air look holy. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the empty altar. "Lord," she whispered, "I'm trying, I am, but some days I'm so tired I forget what I've got left to give." Her voice echoed in the empty room. She reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled envelope, the medical bill. She brought it with her without meaning to, just grabbed her purse, and there it was, $2,200. She stared at the number until it stopped looking like a number and just looked like a wall. "Maybe I've kept the promise long enough," she said to the empty church, to Ray, to Goon, to whoever was listening. "Maybe you'd understand if I just stopped." The light shifted, a cloud moved. The colors on the floor changed from gold to pale gray. She sat there for a long time. Then she pulled Ray's picture from her wallet, the 2 of them on their wedding day, 1968. Both of them so young they looked like children playing dress-up. She touched his face through the plastic. "One more day," she said. "I can do one more day." She put the picture back, put the bill back, stood up and walked out into the cold. That was 8 days before the storm. The afternoon of February 14th, the sky went dark at 3 o'clock. Maggie was folding laundry in the living room when she noticed. She walked to the window and looked out. The sky to the west was the color of a bruise, flat and heavy and wrong. She turned on the radio. The weather station was calling for snow after midnight, maybe 6 inches. Temperatures dropping into the teens. By 4 o'clock, the first flakes were falling. Big, slow, heavy, the kind that stick. By 4:30, the forecast had changed. Blizzard warning through the night, wind chill dropping below -20, interstate closing at 6. Maggie moved through the house with quiet purpose. She filled every pot and pan with water in case the pipes froze, checked the kerosene in the space heater, stacked extra blankets on the couch, found the flashlight, and tested the batteries. Then she did something small, something she couldn't explain later. She walked to the hallway closet and pulled out Ray's old hunting coat, brown canvas, wool-lined. Still smelled like him after all these years. Sawdust and Old Spice and something else that was just Ray. She held it for a moment. Then she carried it to the living room and laid it across the arm of the couch. "Just in case somebody needs it," she whispered. She didn't know why she said it, didn't know why she'd pulled the coat out at all. She would understand by morning. By 7 o'clock, Ridgemont was buried. Snow came down so thick you couldn't see the house across the street. Wind screamed through the power lines. Tree branches cracked under the weight of ice, the sound like gunshots in the dark. Then the power went out. The whole east side of town went dark. Just like that. No street lights, no porch lights, nothing. Maggie's block went silent. She lit 2 candles, set one in the kitchen window, set one on the mantel next to Ray's photo, turned the kerosene heater up as high as it would go. The temperature outside was 22 below zero. Wind chill pushing it even lower. The kind of cold that hurts your lungs when you breathe. The kind that kills. Maggie pulled her quilt tighter around her shoulders and sat in the recliner. The house creaked and groaned against the wind like it was trying to hold itself together. She was alone, and it was going to be a long night. But 5 miles north of Ridgemont on Highway 44, 5 men were fighting for their lives. They were Hell's Angels, a chapter out of upstate New York. 5 riders on 5 Harleys heading south for a memorial ride. They were honoring a fallen brother. The leader of the group was a man named Victor Brennan, 56 years old. Silver beard, broad shoulders, wrap-around sunglasses even in February. Hands like catcher's mitts. The kind of man who took up space without trying. Riding behind him were Rourke Mateo and 2 others. 5 men, 5 machines. Miles of empty highway stretching south through Ohio farmland. The ride was for Victor's older brother Marcus. Died of cancer last spring after fighting it for 2 years. Marcus had been a Hell's Angel for over 20 years. Rode every weekend, lived for the road. Every year since his death, Victor and the chapter made this ride. Same route, same weekend. No matter the weather, it was sacred to them. The storm came in faster than anyone expected. The forecast said snow after midnight, but by 6:30, visibility was already down to nothing. The road turned to black ice. You couldn't see it, couldn't feel it until you were already sliding. Victor's bike went down first. The front tire caught a patch of ice near the exit for Ridgemont, and the Harley slid sideways. 800 pounds of metal skidding across frozen asphalt at 40 miles an hour. Victor went down hard, rolled twice, got up slow, testing his weight on both legs. Nothing broken, just bruised to hell. The others stopped. 2 of the bikes wouldn't restart in the cold. Engines flooded, batteries drained from the temperature. Mateo tried 3 times. Nothing, just a clicking sound and the smell of gasoline. Rourke, the youngest in the group, had caught road rash through his jacket. A deep gash ran from his elbow to his wrist. Blood soaked through the leather, dark and wet. His arm was going numb from the cold. They were stranded. No cell signal. The towers were down from the ice. Victor checked his phone. No bars, nothing. He pulled out his GPS. The screen showed one town nearby, Ridgemont, Ohio, 4.8 miles south. Victor looked at his men, looked at the bikes, looked at the storm. Made the call. "We walk." They buried 3 bikes in snowdrifts on the shoulder. Pushed 2, started south into the wind. 5 men in leather jackets and boots walking through a blizzard in the dark. Let me be real with you for a second. Hypothermia in conditions like that sets in fast. 30 minutes, maybe less, for exposed skin. These men were wet, cold. Rourke was bleeding. The wind was cutting straight through the leather like it wasn't even there. Every step was a fight. Victor walked at the front, kept turning around, counting heads. Nobody sits down, he told them. His voice barely carried over the wind. Nobody stops. You stop, you die. They believed him. It took them almost 2 hours to reach the edge of Maple Terrace. By the time they got there, Rourke could barely stand. His face was white, lips blue. The bleeding had slowed, but only because the cold was shutting his body down. Mateo's feet had gone numb 20 minutes ago. He couldn't feel his toes, couldn't feel anything below his ankles. They were running out of time. The street was dark, every house either empty or locked up tight. People hiding from the storm behind closed doors and drawn curtains. Victor walked up to the first house, knocked hard, 3 times. Nothing. Second house, he knocked again. A curtain moved. He saw it, someone looking out. Then the curtain fell back and the house stayed dark. One of the guys cursed. Rourke was shaking so hard he had to lean against a tree. Mateo's feet were going white. Early frostbite. Victor knew what that looked like. They were out of time. Then Victor saw it. At the end of the block, one small flickering light. A candle in a window, the only light on the entire street. He walked toward it. His boots were caked in 2 inches of ice. Every joint in his body was screaming. He couldn't feel his face. The house was small, 1 story, white siding that needed paint. A chain-link fence around a yard that was buried under snow. But there was a light in the window. Victor walked up the porch steps. The wood creaked under his weight. He stood there for a moment, trying to get his thoughts straight, trying to form words. Then he knocked. 3 heavy knocks. The screen door rattled. Inside, Maggie heard it. She froze, set down her coffee cup, looked at the door, looked at Ray's photo on the mantel. Nobody knocked at 9:30 at night. Not in this weather, not on this street. She picked up the flashlight from the kitchen counter, walked slowly to the front door, put her hand on the knob, took a breath, opened it, and what she saw: 5 enormous men, leather vests, Hell's Angels patches on their backs, beards, tattoos running up their necks, snow crusted on every inch of them, one of them bleeding through his sleeve. 5 white bikers on a black grandmother's porch in the middle of the night. Everything in Maggie's life, every story she'd heard, every warning, every reason the world had given her to be afraid, it all stood right there in front of her. Victor looked at her. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, I'm real sorry to bother you. We got caught out in a storm. One of my guys is hurt. We just need to get out of the cold." The wind howled behind them, silence. Maggie looked at his face, then at the young man bleeding behind him, then back at Victor. For 2 seconds, maybe 3, she stood there. In those seconds, she thought about Ray, thought about the promise, thought about the woman who feeds everybody. Then she opened the door wider. "Well, get in here before you freeze to death. All of you." 5 men filed through Maggie's front door one by one. They filled her small living room completely. Shoulders touching walls, heads nearly brushing the ceiling. Snow melted off their boots onto the linoleum. Water pooled around their feet. The whole room smelled like wet leather and frozen road. Maggie didn't flinch, not once. She looked at them the way a woman looks at a problem she's already decided to solve. "Sit down wherever you can," she said, "and somebody get that boy to my kitchen table." Rourke was guided to a chair by Mateo. His face was pale. Lips had a blue tint. The cut on his forearm was ugly, deep, still bleeding through the torn leather of his jacket. Maggie went straight to the bathroom, came back with Ray's old first aid kit from under the sink. A white metal box with a red cross on the front. She kept it stocked for 11 years, just in case. She sat down across from Rourke, took his arm, gently, rolled back the sleeve. He winced. "Hold still, baby," she said. "I've patched up worse than this." She cleaned the wound with peroxide. Steady hands, no hesitation. The boy hissed through his teeth. She didn't rush, didn't apologize, just worked. She tore strips from a clean bedsheet, didn't even think twice about it. Bandaged his arm tight, neat, careful, like she'd been doing this her whole life. "There," she said, "that'll hold till you see a real doctor." Then she stood up and went to work on the next problem. Food. She had a pot of chicken soup on the stove. Made it that afternoon, enough for maybe 2 servings. Her dinner tonight and lunch tomorrow. She looked at the pot, looked at the 5 men in her living room, did the math in her head. Then she added water, opened a can of kidney beans from the pantry, poured in a cup of rice, stirred it all together, turned the flame up. She pulled out a sleeve of saltine crackers, half a loaf of bread, a jar of pickles she'd canned last summer. She served them first. Every one of them, bowls of soup, crackers on the side, bread torn into pieces. She did not make a bowl for herself, Victor noticed. "Ma'am, aren't you going to eat?" "I had a big lunch," she said, firm. Not angry, just clear. She hadn't. Now the cold. These men were soaked through, shivering down to their bones. Rourke's teeth were chattering so hard you could hear it across the room. Maggie moved through the house, pulling every warm thing she could find. Quilts from both beds, a wool blanket from the hallway closet, an old Afghan her mother had crocheted 40 years ago. Then she went to the couch, picked up Ray's hunting coat, the one she'd laid out that afternoon without knowing why. She walked over to Victor. He was the biggest, the coldest, standing by the wall because there wasn't room for him to sit. She held out the coat. "Put this on," she said. "It was my husband's." Victor looked at her, looked at the coat. Something passed across his face, an emotion he wasn't used to showing. He took it, put it on. It fit almost perfectly. "Thank you, ma'am," he said quietly. Then Maggie turned to Mateo. His boots were off. His feet were white. Early frostbite. She knelt down on the floor, a 72-year-old woman on her knees on cold linoleum, and she took his feet between her palms. She rubbed them, slow, firm, working the blood back in. Mateo stared at her, didn't say a word. His eyes were red. She rubbed until the color started coming back. Then she pulled off her own wool socks, the ones she was wearing, and put them on his feet. "Those are my good socks," she said. "Don't you go running off with them." Mateo laughed. It was the first time any of them had laughed in hours. While all this was happening, Victor was watching. He didn't say much, he just watched. He noticed the 3 buckets in the hallway, lined up under brown water stains on the ceiling. The roof was leaking. He noticed the plastic sheeting taped over the windows, peeling at the edges. He noticed there was no furnace running, just a kerosene heater in the corner doing its best. He noticed the framed photos on the wall. Maggie and Ray on their wedding day, a group shot from the school cafeteria. Maggie in a hairnet smiling surrounded by kids. And he noticed something on the floor under the kitchen table. A magazine, old, dog-eared, being used to prop up a wobbly table leg. He couldn't read the cover from where he was sitting, but the corner of a face was visible. A headline in bold letters. He didn't think about it. Not yet. Maggie hung the men's vest near the kerosene heater to dry. As she draped Victor's vest over a chair, she noticed the back, the big patch, the Hells Angels' death head. She knew what that was. Everybody did. But below it, there was a smaller patch, harder to see, a letter that looked like a T inside some kind of gear shape. She didn't recognize it, didn't think anything of it. Not yet. The men started to talk. Mateo showed her a photo on his phone. His daughter, Lily, 5 years old, blonde curls, missing a front tooth. Rourke talked about his mom, lived alone in Pennsylvania. He called her every Sunday without fail. Victor told her about his brother. The reason for the ride: 20 years on the road, 2 years fighting cancer, gone last spring. Maggie listened to every word like it mattered, because to her it did. That's who she was, the kind of person who made you feel like what you said was important. By 1 in the morning, the men were asleep, stretched out on her floor, her couch, her recliner. 5 massive men crammed into a tiny living room, wrapped in quilts and afghans. Maggie didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, kept the kerosene heater going, watched the candle, listened to the wind, made sure the house stayed warm. She kept watch over 5 strangers like they were her own family. At 3 in the morning, she stood up quietly, went to the kitchen. She took the last of her flour, the last of her sugar, a little bit of buttermilk, and she made biscuits, homemade, from scratch, on the gas stove at 3 a.m. in the middle of a blizzard. She set them on a plate, covered them with a clean towel, put them on the counter for morning. Then she sat back down and waited for the sun. When morning light came through the plastic-covered windows, soft and golden, the wind had stopped. 2 feet of snow on the ground, but the sky was clear for the first time in 14 hours. The men woke up one by one, stiff, sore, blinking in the light. And then they smelled it. Coffee, Maggie's last can of Folgers, and biscuits, warm, golden, sitting on a plate with strawberry preserves she'd canned last summer. 5 massive bikers crammed around a kitchen table built for two, elbows bumping, knees against the wall, eating biscuits with homemade jam like it was the best meal of their lives. Because right then it was. Rourke ate 3. Mateo closed his eyes on the first bite. One of the other guys just shook his head and whispered, "Man." Maggie stood by the stove, watching them eat, sipping her coffee, a small smile on her face. This was her gift, not the food itself, but knowing she'd kept them alive through the night. When they finished, Victor pushed back from the table. He reached into his vest, dry now from hanging near the heater, pulled out a thick fold of cash. Hundreds, at least $1,500. He set it on the table. "Ma'am, this is for everything you did last night. Please take it." Maggie looked at the money, didn't touch it. She pushed it back across the table. Slow, steady, no hesitation. "Put that away," she said. Her voice was firm, not angry, just clear. Then she looked at Victor, really looked at him, and something in her eyes changed, softened and strengthened at the same time. "I didn't help you for money," she said. "I helped you because you needed help." She paused, let that sit. "You know what my husband told me before he died?" Victor shook his head. He said, "Keep being you, Maggie, the woman who feeds everybody." That's all I got left of him. That promise. Her voice got quieter. "So when you knocked on my door last night, you weren't interrupting my life. You were giving me a reason to keep it." The room went completely silent. Victor's eyes got wet. Just for a second, he blinked it away, the kind of man who hadn't cried in front of anyone in decades. "That's the beginning and the end of it," Maggie said. "Now put that money away before I change my mind about you." Victor nodded, put the money back. Then he did something none of his men expected. He pulled out a small notebook from his inside pocket. Not a napkin, a leather-bound notebook, dark brown, gold-edged pages. The kind of thing you'd see be in a boardroom, not on a biker. "Can I have your name, ma'am?" Maggie laughed. "Honey, you don't owe me a thing." "Just in case I want to send a thank you," he said. She gave it to him. "Margaret Dalton." He wrote it down. Careful, deliberate. "And your address," she gave him that too. He wrote it down, closed the notebook, slipped it back in his jacket. Before they left, the men did something that surprised her. They helped. 2 of them cleared the snow off her porch steps. Victor salted the walkway with rock salt from a bag by the house. Mateo noticed the broken hinge on her screen door, sticking for months. fixed it with a multi-tool from his pocket. Didn't ask, just did it. Rourke was the last one out. He stopped, turned around, squeezed Maggie's hand, his bandaged arm still wrapped in her bedsheet strips. "You remind me of my grandma," he said, voice a cracking. Maggie patted his arm. "You call your mama when you get home. You hear me?" He nodded, couldn't speak, walked out. She stood in the doorway and watched them go. 5 figures in black leather walking through white snow, getting smaller and smaller until the road curved and they disappeared. Maggie went back inside, closed the door, sat at the kitchen table, finished her coffee alone. She looked at Ray's photo on the mantel. "I kept the promise, baby," she said. "One more time." For about 2 weeks, nothing happened, and Maggie figured that was the end of the story. She was wrong. Life went back to normal. The pipes survived. The roof still leaked. The buckets went back in the attic. Same routine, same quiet days. Maggie told the Fletcher kids about the bikers over after-school snacks. Their eyes went wide. "5 of them," Keisha asked. "Weren't you scared?" Maggie thought about it for a second. "No, baby. They were just cold." She laughed about it. "5 big old boys sleeping on my floor," she told him. "Ray would have had a fit. That was that. A good story for the kitchen table. Nothing more." But alone after the kids went home, Maggie sat at that same table and looked at her refrigerator, empty except for half a jar of pickles and some margarine. She'd been eating crackers and watered-down soup for 6 days, hadn't told anyone, would never tell anyone. The envelope with the medical bill sat in the drawer, still unopened, still $2,200 she didn't have. She pulled out another envelope, the one where she kept track, wrote down every dollar coming in, every dollar going out. $37 left until the end of the month. That was 9 days away. Her hand shook slightly as she wrote the number. She thought just for a second, maybe I gave too much that night. Maybe I should have kept something back. Then she caught herself, put the pen down hard. "Margaret Dalton," she said out loud to the empty kitchen, "don't you start thinking like that." She looked at Ray's picture on the mantel. "You'd be proud, right, baby?" The picture didn't answer. It never did. But she liked to think he would be. That's when the strange thing started. First, a delivery from the hardware store downtown. Maggie was folding laundry when she heard the truck. She looked out the window. 2 men in matching jackets were unloading something from the back. She opened the door. "Delivery from Margaret Dalton," one of them said. "I didn't order anything. Says here 2 kerosene heater refills, already paid for." Maggie stepped onto the porch. "Paid for by who?" The man checked his clipboard. "Someone called it in. Paid with a credit card over the phone. Wouldn't leave a name. There must be some mistake." "No, ma'am. They gave your exact address. Said to make sure Margaret Dalton got 2 refills." "That's you right. It was." They set the containers on her porch. She signed for them, watched the truck drive away. She called the hardware store that afternoon. "Ma'am, I can't give out customer information," the clerk said. "But someone definitely ordered those for you. Paid in full. Cash transaction over the phone." Maggie hung up, stared at the 2 containers of kerosene sitting by her door. Must be someone from church being generous, she thought. Even though church was 25 minutes away now, and she hadn't been in months. She let it go. Then a week later, a truck pulled up on Maple Terrace. White truck, logo on the side, a roofing company, 2-man crew. They knocked on Maggie's door and told her they'd been contracted to do a courtesy inspection on her roof. Maggie stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. Contracted by who? The foreman checked his paperwork, flipped a page, ran his finger along a line. Client is listed as Trident Holdings. Maggie frowned. "Never heard of them." "That's all I got, ma'am. They just want us to take a look. No charge to you." She was suspicious, but the roof was leaking. Had been for months. The 4th bucket had started overflowing last week, so she let them up. They took photos, measured, made notes. thanked her, and left. That evening, Maggie mentioned it to her neighbor Patrice over the fence. Trident Holdings, Patrice said. That sounds like one of those big investment companies. Maggie waved it off. Probably some kind of scam. But something nagged at her that night. She went to the kitchen, looked at the wobbly table, the one Ray never got around to fixing. She'd been meaning to fix it herself for years, never did. She bent down and pulled out the old magazine she'd been using to prop up the leg, held it up, looked at the cover for the first time in months. America's most unconventional CEOs. A row of small photos along the bottom, faces she didn't recognize, names she'd never heard. She stared at it for a moment. Something flickered at the edge of her mind, something she couldn't quite reach. Then she shook her head, put the magazine back under the table leg, went to bed. 3 weeks after the blizzard, a black SUV pulled up on Maple Terrace, and everything Maggie thought she knew about that night changed. It was a Tuesday, just after 10 in the morning. Maggie was washing dishes at the kitchen sink when she heard it. An engine, low and heavy. Not the kind of car you heard on this street. She looked out the window. A black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows was parked in front of her house. Brand new, chrome wheels, still shining like it just rolled off a lot. Neighbors noticed. Patrice came to her front porch. The woman across the street pulled back her curtain. A car like that on Maple Terrace meant something, and it was never good news. Two men in dark suits stepped out of the back seat. They stood by the car, hands folded, sunglasses, like the Secret Service. Then the front passenger door opened, and a man stepped out. Tall, broad shoulders, clean-shaven, silver hair cut short, wearing a tailored charcoal overcoat and polished shoes. Maggie didn't recognize him. Not at first. He looked like he'd just walked off the cover of a business magazine. And in a way he had. He walked up her porch steps. Same steps he'd climbed 3 weeks ago, caked in ice, half frozen to death. This time his shoes were dry. His back was straight. His face was calm. He knocked. 2 knocks. Gentle this time. Maggie opened the door, looked at him, looked at the Escalade, looked at the suits standing by the car. Then she looked back at his face. Something clicked. The eyes. She recognized the eyes. "Well, I'll be," she said slowly, "the biker." Victor smiled. "Yes, ma'am." He stood there in her doorway, the same doorway where he'd stood shaking and half dead 3 weeks ago, and he introduced himself properly. His full name was Victor Brennan. He was the founder and CEO of Trident Holdings, a logistics and infrastructure conglomerate based out of Columbus, Ohio. He'd started the company at 29 years old, in a rented warehouse with 2 employees and a used truck. 26 years later, that company was worth $2.8 billion, 4,000 employees across 6 states. Victor Brennan was one of the most powerful businessmen in Ohio, and 3 weeks ago he was freezing to death on Maggie Dalton's porch. Maggie's eyes went wide. She looked at the Escalade again, then the suits, then back at Victor. "You're telling me you're some kind of CEO?" "Yes, ma'am," he said it simply, no flash, no ego. "But that night I was just a man who was freezing to death, and you saved my life." Maggie put her hand on the doorframe, steadied herself. Her mind was racing. The memorial ride. His brother, the fallen one they were honoring, had been a lifelong Hells Angels member. Died of cancer last spring. Every year since Victor rode with the chapter. Same route, same weekend. No bodyguards, no Escalade, just leather in the road. That's who he was on that night. Not a CEO, just a brother honoring a brother. But now standing in her doorway in a charcoal overcoat, the other side of him was showing. And suddenly the pieces started falling into place. The patch on his vest, the small T inside a gear shape. That wasn't a biker patch. That was the Trident Holdings logo. Maggie had looked right at it, hung it by the heater to dry. The leather notebook, dark brown, gold-edged pages. That wasn't a journal. That was his daily planner. The kind of man carries when his schedule runs a 4,000-person company. The way he said, "Yes, ma'am." The way he took his boots off at the door. The way he folded the quilt she gave him. The way he silenced his guy with a look when feet went on the couch. That wasn't just politeness. That was discipline. The habits of a man who ran boardrooms for a living. And the magazine, the one under her kitchen table, propping up the wobbly leg, America's most unconventional CEOs. His face was on that cover. She'd been using it to level her table for 6 months. Maggie stared at Victor, then she started to laugh. Not a polite laugh, a deep, full surprise laugh, the kind that shakes your whole body. "I used your face to keep my kitchen table from wobbling," she said. Victor laughed too, hard. The suits by the car looked at each other, confused. The ice broke completely. But then Victor got serious. He stepped inside, sat down at her kitchen table, the same chair, the same spot where he'd eaten her biscuits 3 weeks ago. He looked around the room, at the buckets, the plastic windows, the kerosene heater doing the work of a furnace that didn't run. Then he looked at Maggie. "Miss Dalton," he said, "I've sat in boardrooms with people who had every advantage in the world. Money, power, resources, and most of them wouldn't have opened that door." He paused. "You had every reason not to, every single one. And you didn't just open it, you gave us everything you had." His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. "I've been thinking about that night every single day since," he leaned forward. "I want to do something, not as a payment because you made it very clear how you feel about that." Maggie almost smiled. "As an investment," he said, "in you and in this neighborhood." The room was quiet. The heater hummed. The candle on the mantel, still there from that night, flickered once. Maggie looked at Ray's photo, then back at Victor. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She said, "I'm listening." Victor reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. Set it on the kitchen table between them. Didn't open it yet. "I'm going to walk you through this one piece at a time," he said, "and I need you to hear the whole thing before you say a word. Can you do that for me?" Maggie folded her hands in her lap, nodded once. Victor opened the folder. "First, this house." He looked around the room, the water stains on the ceiling, the plastic on the windows, the buckets in the hallway. "Trident Holdings is going to renovate your home, top to bottom, new roof, new furnace, updated electrical plumbing insulation. Every window replaced." Maggie opened her mouth. Victor held up a hand. "I'm not finished." He looked at her carefully. "We're not tearing anything down. Ray built that back porch. We're not touching it. We're fixing everything around it." Maggie's eyes filled. She pressed her lips together, didn't speak, but her chin trembled just slightly. Victor turned to the second page. "Now I noticed something about you that night, Miss Dalton, and I've been thinking about it ever since." He paused. "You feed people. That's who you are. You made soup for 5 strangers out of almost nothing. You left plates on your neighbors' porches. You fed those kids at after school. Feeding people, that's your thing." Maggie said nothing, but her hands tightened in her lap. 2 blocks from here, there's a vacant storefront. Used to be Ridgemont Hardware, been sitting empty for 3 years. Maggie knew the building, passed it every time she walked to the corner store. Dusty windows, faded sign, weeds growing through the sidewalk cracks out front. Trident's charitable foundation is going to convert that building into a community kitchen and meal program. Full commercial kitchen. Tables for 40, open 5 days a week. He looked at her. "And you're going to run it." Maggie blinked. "Me." "You, head of operations, pay position. You'll have a staff, a piece from all, hired from this neighborhood. We'll cover everything. Rent, utilities, equipment, food supply for the first 3 years. After that, we transition to a sustainable model with local partnerships." Maggie stared at him. Her mouth was slightly open. No words came out. Victor turned another page. Third the street. He gestured toward the window. Maple Terrace. Cracked sidewalks. No streetlights on the south end. Kids playing in the road because there was nowhere else. Trident Foundation is putting up a $500,000 block grant for Maple Terrace. Specifically, sidewalk repair, new streetlights, and a playground right on that empty lot at the end of the block. He let that sit for a moment. The grant will be managed by a community board, local residents making local decisions. And I'd like you to chair it. Maggie's hands were shaking now. She pressed them flat against her knees. Victor turned to the last page. One more thing. He set down his pen. This one was personal. She could see it in his face. Trident is establishing 2 annual college scholarships, $15,000 each, awarded to Ridgemont High School seniors who demonstrate community service. He looked at her. They'll be called the Ray and Margaret Dalton Scholarships. That's when Maggie broke, not dramatically, not the way people break in movies. She didn't scream. She didn't fall out of her chair. She just went very, very still. And then the tears came, slow, quiet, rolling down her cheeks one after another. The kind of tears that come from a place so deep you didn't even know it was there. The tears of a woman who had held everything together. Every bill, every leak, every cold night, every empty chair at the table for 11 years. Without asking anyone for anything. And someone finally saw her. The room was silent except for the hum of the kerosene heater. Victor didn't speak. He just sat there, gave her the space. After a long moment, Maggie wiped her face with the back of her hand, took a breath, steadied herself. Then she spoke, quiet, almost a whisper. You're telling me those kids on the street are going to have a place to play? Victor nodded. And somebody's going to help them go to college. Yes, ma'am, because I made soup. Victor leaned forward. His voice was steady, but his eyes were full. Because you opened the door, Miss Dalton. Another silence, longer this time. Maggie looked at Ray's photo on the mantel, looked at it for a long time, like she was telling him something, like she was asking permission. Then she looked back at Victor. Can I name the kitchen after Ray too? Victor didn't hesitate. You can name it whatever you want. Maggie reached across the table. Small hand, his twice the size. They shook on it. Then we've got a deal, she said. And for the first time in that conversation, Margaret Dalton smiled, really smiled. The kind of smile that changes the whole shape of a face. The kind that comes from somewhere so real it almost hurts to look at. Victor smiled back. Outside, the sun hit the snow on Maple Terrace and the whole street lit up white. But that's not where it ended. 2 days later, Maggie was sitting on her porch when Patrice came over. You look happy, Patrice said. Maggie was, for the first time in a long time. Just thinking, she said. About what? About how sometimes good things happen. Patrice sat down on the step beside her. You want to tell me what's going on? So Maggie told her all of it. The bikers, the storm, the CEO, the offer. Patrice listened, didn't interrupt. And when Maggie finished, Patrice was quiet for a long time. Then she said, that's too good to be true. Maggie looked at her. I mean it, Patrice said. People don't just do that, rich people especially. What's he want? He doesn't want anything. Everybody wants something, Maggie. Maybe it's PR. Maybe he's buying your story so he can feel good about himself. Look at me, I helped the poor black lady. Aren't I wonderful? The words stung, not because they were mean, but because they planted a seed. Maggie went inside that night and sat at her kitchen table. She thought about what Patrice said. What if this was just for show? What if Victor was using her? And even if he wasn't, what would people think? They wouldn't see Margaret Dalton got blessed. They'd see Margaret Dalton got bought. And everything she'd been trying to do here, being invisible, just helping, it would all be gone. She looked at Ray's picture. "What do I do, baby?" she whispered. "What do I do?" The next day, the mayor's office called. Mayor Gerald Moss. Been in office for 12 years. Maggie had never spoken to him directly. "Miss Dalton," he said, voice friendly but cautious. "I hear there's a big development project coming to your neighborhood." "It's not a development," Maggie said. "It's a community kitchen." "Well, whatever it is, it needs permits, inspections. We can't just let outside companies come in and start building things." "It's a charitable foundation." "I understand that. But there are procedures, Miss Dalton. This is still my town." The way he said my town made Maggie's stomach turn. "I'm not trying to cause trouble," she said. "I know you're not, but I can't have people thinking I'm giving special treatment. Everything has to go through the proper channels." He hung up. Maggie sat there with the phone in her hand. Proper channels. That meant months, maybe years. That meant forms and fees and meetings with people who didn't care. That meant it might not happen at all. She looked at the folder Victor had left, still sitting on her kitchen table. Then she looked at Ray's picture, and she made a decision. She called Victor that afternoon. He picked up on the second ring. "Miss Dalton, everything okay?" "I need to talk to you." "Of course, when... Now if you can. I'll be there in an hour." He was there in 45 minutes. They sat at the kitchen table again. Same spot. But this time Maggie spoke first. "I can't accept this," she said. Victor's face didn't change. He just waited. "I've been thinking about what you said, about investing in me, in this neighborhood. And it sounds real nice. It does." She paused. "But you know what this looks like? It looks like you're buying me, buying my story so you can feel good about yourself." Her voice got stronger. "Oh, look, rich CEO helps poor black grandma. Aren't I wonderful? Put it in the papers, put it in your annual report. Make yourself look like a saint." Victor didn't interrupt, just let her talk. "And what about my neighbors? You think they'll see Margaret Dalton got blessed?" "No, sir. They'll see Margaret Dalton got bought. And everything I've been doing here, being invisible, just helping people, it's gone. All gone." She looked at him hard. "I didn't open that door for this. I opened it because it was right. And now you're making it into a transaction." The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Victor spoke. "Can I tell you about my brother?" Maggie nodded. "The one we were riding for. His name was Marcus, older brother, raised me when my dad left. Worked 3 jobs so I could finish school." His voice got thick. "He died broke, Miss Dalton. Cancer ate everything he had. And you know what his last words to me were?" Maggie shook her head. "Don't let what I did for you die with me. Pass it on." He looked at her. "This isn't about you or me. It's about what we're supposed to do when someone gives us a gift we can't repay." He paused. "You gave me my life back that night. Not just my body, my soul. You reminded me why I started this company. Not to make money, to help people." He leaned forward. "So this isn't charity, Miss Dalton. It's obedience to what your husband told you, to what my brother told me, to pass it on." Maggie's eyes filled again, but she still hesitated. "What if I can't do it? What if I fail?" Victor smiled. "Then you'll fail like you've always failed, by trying to help too much." Maggie sat with that for a moment. Then she said, "I need to think and pray. Can you give me a week?" "Take all the time you need." He stood, walked to the door, turned back. "But Miss Dalton, that kitchen already has a name. The Ray and Margaret Dalton Community Kitchen. Whether you run it or not." He left. Maggie sat alone, looking at Ray's picture. "What do I do, baby?" For the next week, Maggie barely slept. She walked through the house at night, talked to Ray, talked to God, talked to herself. On day 3, she went back to the old church on Brewster Street, sat in the same pew. Lord, she said, I don't know what to do. Part of me wants this so bad I can taste it, but part of me is scared. Scared I'm being used. Scared I'll let people down. Scared it's all too good to be true. The light came through the stained glass, red and gold. Give me a sign, she whispered. Please, just show me what to do. She sat there for an hour. No sign came. She went home. On day 5, Patrice came over. I'm sorry, she said. Maggie looked up from her coffee. I was wrong, Patrice said. What I said the other day, I was jealous and scared. Scared that if good things happen to you, it means they'll never happen to me. She sat down. But Maggie, you've been giving to this street for 30 years. Maybe it's time you let somebody give to you. Maggie nodded, didn't trust herself to speak. That night alone in the dark, Maggie had a moment she'd never told anyone about. Not Patrice, not Diane, not even Ray's picture. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looked at herself, really looked. 72 years old, gray hair, lined face, hands that shook sometimes. A woman who heated her house with a kerosene heater and ate crackers for dinner. A woman the world had forgotten, and now someone wanted to put her name on a building, on scholarships, on a future she'd never see. Who am I? She whispered to her reflection. Who am I to deserve this? The answer came quiet, not from Ray, not from God, from somewhere deeper. You're the woman who opened the door. That's all. That's enough. She wiped her eyes, turned off the light, went to bed, and for the first time in a week, she slept. On day 7, little Keisha Fletcher came to the door after school. Maggie opened it, saw Keisha standing there, eyes red. She'd been crying. Miss Maggie, Maggie knelt down. What's wrong, baby? Teacher said today that some people can't go to college because they don't have money. Is that true? Maggie's heart broke a little. Sometimes, yes. Can somebody help them sometimes? Keisha looked at her with those big brown eyes. 7 years old, wanted to be a teacher. Can somebody help me? Maggie froze. In that moment, she saw everything. Ray on his hospital bed. Keep being you. Victor at her kitchen table. Pass it on. Every kid on this street who deserved a chance. And she knew this was the sign. She pulled Keisha into her arms. Yes, baby. Somebody can help you. I promise. Keisha left. Maggie stood in her living room, looking at the house Ray built, the porch he made with his hands, the life they'd shared. She picked up the folder Victor had left, opened it, read every word again, and this time she didn't see charity. She didn't see pity. She saw Ray's promise coming true in a way she never imagined. Keep being you, the woman who feeds everybody. This kitchen, that was her. Multiplied. These scholarships, that was Ray, living on. This street getting fixed, that was every plate she'd left on a porch, every kid she'd watched, every quiet act of love she thought nobody saw. Somebody had seen, and now he was asking her to let that love grow. She closed the folder, picked up the phone. Her hand didn't shake this time. I have one condition, she said when Victor answered. Name it. I run that kitchen my way. We feed everybody, no questions, no paperwork, no checking if people deserve it, just food. Victor laughed. I wouldn't have it any other way. Maggie took a breath. And Mr. Brennan, yes, ma'am. Thank you for seeing me. There was a pause on the other end. Thank you for opening the door. 3 months later, construction crews showed up on Maple Terrace. Trucks, scaffolding. Workers in hard hats carrying lumber up Maggie's front steps. The roof came off first. The old one. Patched, leaking. Held together with prayers and buckets. Gone. Replaced with new shingles, new flashing, new gutters. Then the furnace. A real one. Installed in the basement. For the first time in over a year, Maggie turned a thermostat dial and felt warm air come through the vents. She stood over the vent in the hallway for 5 minutes, didn't move, just stood there with her eyes closed. New windows went in, double paned, no more plastic sheeting, no more tape peeling off in the middle of the night. Electrical, plumbing, insulation in the walls, and the back porch, raised porch, stayed exactly where it was. They worked around it, just like Victor promised. Maggie sat on that porch the morning after the renovation finished, coffee in hand, no coat needed inside anymore. She looked out at the street and whispered, "We got a new roof, baby." The kitchen was next. The old Ridgemont hardware storefront, dusty windows, faded sign, weeds in the cracks. Gone. In its place stood something alive. Fresh paint, warm lighting, tables for 40, a commercial kitchen with steel counters and a six-burner stove that made Maggie's eyes go wide the first time she saw it. A sign hung above the front door, hand-painted, simple, the Ray and Margaret Dalton Community Kitchen. Maggie stood in front of that sign and cried for 10 minutes straight. Opening day was 6 months after that night in the snow. Maggie was there at 6 in the morning, wearing an apron that said head chef, even though she told everyone she was just warming things up. She was nervous, more nervous than she'd been in years. What if nobody came? What if they came but didn't trust it? What if Patrice was right and this was all some kind of setup? 7 o'clock came, the doors open, nobody. 7:15, 7:30, 7:45. Maggie sat at one of the empty tables, looked around at the empty chairs. The kitchen gleamed, the soup simmered on the stove, everything was ready, but nobody came. She thought about all the work, the money, Victor's faith in her. Maybe they don't trust me anymore, she thought. Maybe I ruined it. Maybe they think I'm too good for them now. Maybe I sold out after all. She sat there in the silence. Just her and 40 empty chairs and a pot of soup nobody wanted. At 8 o'clock, the door opened. Maggie looked up. Diane Patterson stood in the doorway. Diane, the woman from 3 doors down, the one who'd been saying Maggie sold out, saying she'd been bought, saying this whole thing was fake. She stood there, looking around, looking at Maggie. Her voice came out small, pride wounded. "I heard you got breakfast." Maggie's heart stopped, then started again, faster. She stood up, and she smiled. "Come on in, Diane. Got a seat with your name on it." Diane walked in slow, sat down, wouldn't look at Maggie. Maggie went to the kitchen, came back with a bowl of soup, fresh bread, set it in front of Diane. Then she sat down across from her. "Maggie," Diane started, "I said some things." "I know. I said you sold out, said you got bought, said this was all fake." "I know." Diane finally looked up, eyes wet. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Maggie leaned forward, took Diane's hand. "Diane, you were protecting yourself. I get it. The world's taught you not to trust things that look too good. But here's the thing." She squeezed Diane's hand. "This place isn't mine. It's ours. And you're always welcome. Always. No matter what you said, no matter what you thought. This door is open for you." Diane started crying right there at the table, ate through the tears. When she finished, she looked up at Maggie. "Can I ask you something? Anything? Can I help tomorrow volunteer?" Maggie's smile got bigger. 7 a.m. Don't be late. After Diane, the floodgates opened. By 8:30, the Fletcher family came in. By 9, there were 15 people. By 10:30, by noon 80. 200 meals served that first day. The local news showed up. Camera crew, reporter. They asked Maggie how it felt. She said, "Feels like Tuesday. We're just feeding people." The story aired that night. The phones started ringing. But the best part? The part that meant everything to Maggie came the next morning. Diane Patterson showed up at 7 a.m. sharp, apron in hand, and she'd been there every day since. 2 blocks away from the kitchen, the empty lot at the end of Maple Terrace was transformed. For years it had been nothing. Dirt and broken glass and weeds as tall as a grown man. The kind of place parents told their kids to stay away from. Now it was something else entirely. A playground, small but perfect, a swing set, a climbing wall, rubber surfacing so the kids wouldn't scrape their knees when they fell. The Fletcher kids were the first ones on it. Maggie watched from her porch as they ran screaming across the street. Keisha hit the swings first. Her brothers fought over the climbing wall. Their laughter echoed down the whole block. Patrice organized a Saturday morning gathering she called Porch and Play. Parents sat on their stoops, watched the kids, talked to each other, something that hadn't happened on Maple Terrace in years. New streetlights went up on the south end. The sidewalks got repaired. Smooth concrete where there used to be cracks big enough to trip over. For the first time in a long time, Maple Terrace looked like a place where people wanted to be. But the scholarships, that's what broke Maggie all over again. Spring came. The announcement went out to Ridgemont High School, 2 scholarships, $15,000 each, for seniors who demonstrated community service. The Ray and Margaret Dalton scholarships. Maggie didn't think anyone would apply. Why would they? Nobody knew who she was. Nobody cared about some old woman who used to work in a school cafeteria. She was wrong. 47 students applied. 47 kids wrote essays about service, about helping, about being the kind of person who sees people. The selection committee narrowed it down to 2. Tamara Davis, 17 years old, wanted to study nursing, first person in her family to go to college. Her mother cleaned houses for a living, couldn't read well, but she told Tamara about the woman who fed people even when she had nothing. Told her that's what real strength looked like. And Wesley Moore, 18, planned to study civil engineering, wanted to come back to Ridgemont after graduation, wanted to build things, fix things, make the town what it used to be. The ceremony was held at the high school, senior assembly, late May, the gym packed with students and parents and teachers. Maggie sat in the front row, hands folded in her lap, wearing the nicest dress she owned, the same one she'd worn to Ray's funeral 11 years ago. When they called her name to present the awards, she almost couldn't stand. Her legs were shaking. But she did. She walked up to that podium, looked out at all those faces. Tamara came up first. Maggie handed her the certificate, the check, looked into that young girl's eyes. "Your mama was right," Maggie said quietly, just between them. "That's what real strength is." Tamara hugged her, held on tight, whispered thank you over and over. Then Wesley. Maggie shook his hand, gave him his award. Then she turned to the microphone. To all those students staring up at her, she hadn't planned to say anything, but standing there, she couldn't help it. "Your job isn't to pay this back," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried. "Your job is to pass it on." The auditorium was silent. "That's all any of us can do. Take what we're given and give it to somebody else." She looked at the empty seat beside her, the one where Ray should have been. "My husband taught me that, and I'm still learning it." She stepped back from the microphone. The applause started slow, then built. Then the whole auditorium was on their feet. Maggie cried, standing right there in front of everyone. After the ceremony, Tamara found her in the hallway. "Miss Dalton," she said, "I just want you to know something." Maggie waited. "My mama cleans houses. She can't read good, but she told me about you, how you feed people even when you got nothing. And I just want you to know that's the reason I believed I could do this. Before the money, before any of this, just knowing somebody like you existed. That was enough." Maggie pulled that girl into her arms and held on tight, tears streaming down her face right there in the hallway. And for once, she didn't care who saw. That summer, the bikers came back. Maggie was at the kitchen one Saturday morning when she heard the rumble, that deep, unmistakable sound of Harley engines. She walked to the window. 5 motorcycles rolling down Maple Terrace. Slow, respectful, Victor in the front, Rourke behind him, Mateo, the others. They parked in front of the kitchen, took off their helmets, walked in wearing their cuts. The whole room went quiet. 5 Hells Angels walking into a community kitchen in Ridgemont, Ohio. Maggie came out from behind the counter, smiling so wide her face hurt. Well, look what the cat dragged in. Victor hugged her, careful, like she might break. Had to see it for ourselves, he said. They sat at a table, all 5 of them. Maggie served them herself. Same soup, same recipe from that night. She'd made it special that morning, somehow knew they were coming. Rourke took a spoonful, grinned. Still better than my mom's. Mateo had brought his daughter this time. Little Lily, 5 years old, blonde curls. The missing tooth had been replaced. Maggie knelt down in front of her. Well, aren't you just the prettiest thing? Lily smiled, shy. You want some soup, baby? Lily nodded. Maggie made her a bowl, watched her eat. That little girl sitting in the kitchen that bore Maggie's name, eating soup made by Maggie's hands. It felt like everything coming full circle. After lunch, Victor asked if they could talk. Just the 2 of them. They walked outside, stood in the sunshine. I wanted to tell you something, Victor said. The board fought me on this, said it was a waste of money, said there was no return on investment. Maggie started to speak, but he held up a hand. But after we did this, after we saw what happened here, everything changed. We started a company-wide initiative, called it Open Door Day. Every year, all 4,000 employees volunteer at community kitchens and shelters across Ohio. He looked at her. You started that, one night, one door. That's what it took. Maggie shook her head. I didn't start anything. I just made soup. You did more than that, Miss Dalton. You reminded me what it means to be human. They stood there in silence for a moment. Then Victor said, my brother would have liked you. Ray would have liked you too, Maggie said, even if you did ride a motorcycle. They both laughed. The media attention came next. Maggie hated it. A Columbus TV station picked up the story, then a regional newspaper. Then it went wider, shared online, posted and reposted, screenshots of headlines. Grandmother opens door to dying bikers. What happened next will restore your faith. She refused most interview requests, but a few got through. A reporter came to the kitchen one afternoon. Young woman with a notebook and a recorder. Miss Dalton, people are calling you a hero. Maggie was wiping down tables. I'm not a hero, I just let some cold people inside. But you gave them everything you had, because they needed it. Weren't you scared 5 strangers, middle of the night? Maggie stopped wiping, looked at the reporter. You want to know the truth, she said. I was terrified, but fear doesn't get to make the decision, not when somebody's dying on your porch. What would you say to people watching people going through hard times? Maggie thought about it. I'd say you don't have to have a lot to give a lot. And when you give, you get back more than you gave, not in money, in something better, in knowing you did right. The interview aired that week, went viral within hours. Maggie's phone rang off the hook. The kitchen got so many donation offers, they had to hire someone just to manage them. Patrice came over one evening, found Maggie on the back porch, Ray's porch. You okay, Patrice asked. I didn't do this for cameras, Maggie said. I didn't do it so people would know my name. I know. Then why won't they leave me alone? Patrice sat down beside her. Because people are starving Maggie, not for food, for proof that good still exists, and you gave them that. Maggie looked out at the street, at the kids playing on the new playground, at the lights that work now, at the smooth sidewalks. Ray and I used to sit here, she said, every summer night. He'd drink sweet tea, I'd drink lemonade, and we'd just watch the world go by. He'd be proud of you. I hope so. I know so. 3 years passed. The kitchen served over 15,000 meals a year. 8 Ray and Margaret Dalton scholarships had been awarded. 4 of those students had already graduated college. One was in medical school. One was teaching third grade in Ridgemont. One was working for the city planning department. One had joined the Peace Corps. The playground on Maple Terrace expanded. They added a basketball court, resurfaced the whole area. It was packed every afternoon, every weekend. 3 other towns in Ohio opened community kitchens modeled on Maggie's. Used her name, asked her advice. She helped every one of them. Open Door Day at Trident Holdings grew. All 4,000 employees participated, volunteered at shelters and kitchens and food banks across the state. Victor sent Maggie a photo every year. Thousands of people in matching t-shirts, serving meals. The photo always made her cry, but Maggie was getting older. She was 75 now. Her knees hurt. Her back hurt. Getting up at 5:30 every morning was harder than it used to be. Diane kept telling her to slow down. Take a day off. Let someone else open the kitchen. But Maggie couldn't. Not yet. Because she'd made a promise. Keep being you. The woman who feeds everybody. And she wasn't done yet. February 14th came around again, 4 years after that first night. Another storm rolled through Ridgemont. Not as bad as the first one, but bitter cold, heavy snow, the kind of night that empties the streets and locks the doors. Maggie looked at the weather report that afternoon. Somebody might need a warm place tonight, she said to Diane. Diane was getting ready to close up the kitchen. It was almost 6. They usually closed at 5. Maggie, go home, get some rest. Just a little longer. It's a bad storm. Nobody's coming out. Maybe, but maybe somebody will. Diane knew that look, knew there was no arguing. Fine, but I'm staying with you. You don't have to do that. I know. So they stayed, made a double batch of soup, stacked blankets by the door, put coffee on, wiped down the tables, turned every light on so the building glowed from the street. By 9 o'clock, they were alone. A few regulars had come through early, ate, thanked them, went home before the snow got worse. Now it was just Maggie and Diane sitting at a table, waiting. You can go, Maggie said. I'll be fine. I'm good. At 9:15, there was a knock on the door, almost the exact same time as 4 years ago, almost the exact same sound. Maggie and Diane looked at each other. Maggie stood, walked to the door, opened it. A young woman stood there, mid-20s, white, shivering so hard she could barely stand, holding a toddler wrapped in a blanket against her chest. The child's face was red from the cold. My car broke down, the woman said. Her voice was barely there. On the highway, we walked. I don't know how far. I saw the light. She was crying, not from sadness, from relief, from being so cold and so scared and finally finding a door that was open. Maggie didn't hesitate, not for 1 second. Same voice, same words. 4 years later. Get in here before you freeze to death. She took the child, wrapped him in a warm blanket, sat him in a chair by the heater, heated soup, poured coffee, called a tow truck. Then she sat across from the young woman. Let her cry, let her breathe, let her get warm. The woman looked at Maggie through wet eyes. Why are you being so kind to me? Maggie smiled, soft, steady. Somebody knocked on my door once too. This is just what we do here. The woman looked around, saw the sign above the door, the Ray and Margaret Dalton Community Kitchen. This place, she said, it's beautiful. What's it named after? My husband, Maggie said, and well, me, I guess. She laughed a little, still not used to seeing her own name up there. Your husband must have been a good man. Maggie looked up, like she could see through the ceiling, see Ray somewhere beyond it. He was, and he made me promise to keep being me, the woman who feeds everybody. She looked back at the young woman. So when you knocked tonight, you weren't interrupting. You were reminding me. She stood, ladled 2 more bowls of soup. Now eat, you got a long night ahead. They ate together. Diane cleaned the kitchen, gave them space. Outside, the snow kept falling. The wind pushed against the windows. But inside, there was warm light, warm soup, 2 people at a table. The sign above the door glowed in the storm. The young woman's name was Sarah. The child was her son, 2 years old, named Michael. Her car had broken down 5 miles outside Ridgemont. Battery died in the cold. She tried calling for help, but her phone was dead too. Started walking because she didn't know what else to do. Saw the lights of the kitchen from the highway. The tow truck came an hour later. The driver said he could fix it, but not tonight. Not in this storm. He'd come back in the morning. You got a place to stay? Maggie asked. Sarah shook her head. I was trying to get to my sister's. She's in Columbus, but I don't have money for a hotel. Maggie looked at Diane. Diane nodded. You're staying with me, Maggie said. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Sarah started crying again. They drove to Maggie's house, the 3 of them. Sarah held Michael in the back seat. The roads were terrible, but they made it. Inside, Maggie gave them the guest room. Ray's old office that she'd converted after he died, put fresh sheets on the bed, found extra blankets, made sure they had everything they needed. Get some sleep, she said. We'll figure everything out in the morning. Sarah grabbed her hand. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to thank me, baby. Just do the same for someone else when you get the chance. That night, Maggie lay in her own bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about that first night, 4 years ago, 5 frozen men on her porch. She thought about Ray, the promise. She thought about Victor, the scholarships, the kitchen, the playground. She thought about Tamara and Wesley and all the kids who'd gotten a chance they wouldn't have had. She thought about Sarah and Michael asleep in the next room, and she realized something. This was never about her. It was about the door, about keeping it open, about being ready, about saying yes when the world said no. Ray had known that. That's why he'd made her promise. Not to be extraordinary, just to stay who she was. The woman who feeds everybody. She fell asleep with a smile on her face. In the morning, the storm had passed. Sarah's car was fixed by noon. The tow truck driver wouldn't take payment, said someone had already covered it. Sarah knew who, looked at Maggie with tears in her eyes. I'll never forget this, she said. I know you won't. And someday, someone's going to knock on your door, and you'll remember, and you'll let them in. Sarah nodded, got in her car with Michael, drove away. Maggie stood on her porch, watching them go. Just like she'd watched Victor and his men disappear into the snow 4 years ago, the cycle continuing, the door staying open. 5 years after that first night, a documentary crew came to Ridgemont. They'd heard the story, wanted to film it, wanted to talk to everyone involved. Maggie said no at first, but Victor convinced her. This isn't about you anymore, he said. It's about showing people what's possible. So she agreed. They interviewed her at the kitchen, at her house on Ray's porch. They talked to Victor, to Rourke and Mateo, to the Fletcher kids who were older now. Keisha was in high school, talking about becoming a teacher like she'd always wanted. They talked to Tamara, who was in her residency at a hospital in Cleveland, and to Wesley, who was working for the city designing a new community center. They talked to Diane, to Patrice, to dozens of people whose lives had been touched by that one night. The documentary premiered at a film festival in New York. Maggie didn't go. Too far, too much. But Victor went, called her afterward. Standing ovation, he said. 5 minutes straight. That's nice. Maggie, they want to show it in schools. Use it to teach about service, about compassion. She was quiet for a moment. As long as they know it's not about me. They know it's about the door. Good. A year later, Maggie finally stepped back from the kitchen. 76 years old. Arthritis so bad she could barely walk some days. Diane and the others begged her to let someone else take over. She did. Finally, appointed Diana as the new head, trained her, taught her everything. But Maggie still came in 3 days a week, sat at a table, talked to people, made sure everyone who walked through that door felt seen. Because that was the whole point, not the food, the seeing. On a Tuesday morning in February, 7 years after that first night, Maggie sat at her kitchen table. The house was warm, the roof didn't leak, the furnace ran perfectly. Ray's porch was still there, still strong. She was drinking coffee from the same percolator, feeding Bishop and Deacon, who were old now, moving slow, just like her. She looked at Ray's picture on the mantel. "I kept the promise, baby," she said. "Every day, just like you asked." The doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. She walked to the door, opened it. A young man stood there, maybe 25, neat haircut, nice clothes, nervous smile. "Miss Dalton." "Yes. My name is Marcus. I am Victor Brennan's nephew. My uncle passed away last month." Maggie's hand went to her chest. "Oh no, I didn't know." It was sudden, heart attack. But he was at peace. Marcus held out an envelope. "He left this for you. You asked me to deliver it personally." Maggie took the envelope. Her hands were shaking. "Thank you." Marcus nodded, started to leave, then turned back. "He talked about you all the time, said you changed his life. Said that night on your porch was the most important night he ever lived." Maggie couldn't speak, just nodded. Marcus left. She went inside, sat at the table, opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten, Victor's careful script. "Dear Miss Dalton, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope I got to say goodbye in person, but if not, this will have to do. I've been thinking about what to say to you for 7 years. Since that night you opened your door. I've started this letter 100 times, thrown it away 100 times. Because how do you thank someone for saving your life? Not just your body, but your soul. You don't? Not really. You just try to pass it on. That's what I've tried to do. Every day since that night. In big ways and small ways. Trying to be the kind of person who opens doors instead of closing them. But I need you to know something. It wasn't just me you saved that night. It was Rourke, who went home and told his mother he loved her, who got married last year, who named his daughter Margaret. It was Mateo, who started volunteering at a youth center, who coaches Little League now, who tells his daughter Lily about the woman with the good socks. It was the 4,000 people at my company who volunteer every year because of what you started. It was the hundreds of kids who've eaten at your kitchen, the 8 who've gone to college on scholarships bearing your name. It was every single person who's heard your story and decided to be a little braver, a little kinder, a little more open. You did that by making soup, by giving away your socks, by opening a door. My brother Marcus told me to pass it on. You showed me how. I hope I made you proud. I hope I made him proud. Thank you, Margaret Dalton, for everything. Keep the door open. Your friend Victor. Maggie read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, put it in the drawer where she kept Ray's things, his wedding ring, his watch, the program from his funeral. She sat at the table, looked at his picture for a long time. "He's with you now, baby," she said. "Tell him I said thank you for not giving up that night, for knocking on my door." She wiped her eyes, took a breath, then she said something she'd been holding for 11 years. "I kept both promises, baby." She paused. "The first one was easy. I survived." She touched his picture. "The second one, that one nearly broke me. But you know what? It saved me." She stood up, looked around the warm house, the roof that didn't leak, the windows that kept the cold out, walked to the window, looked out at the street, kids playing on the playground, clean sidewalks, street lights that worked. The woman who feeds everybody, she whispered. That's who I am. That's who I'll always be. She put on her coat, Ray's old coat actually, the one she'd given Victor that night. He'd had it cleaned and returned to her a year later. She wore it every winter now. She locked the door, started down the sidewalk toward the kitchen. The February air was cold but not bitter. The sky was clear. Kids playing called out. Miss Maggie waved. She waved back, smiled, kept walking, walked into the kitchen, the sign above the door. Ray and Margaret Dalton. Diane was already there, setting up for the day. Morning, Maggie. Morning, baby. Maggie put on her apron, started chopping vegetables for soup, because that's what you do when you make a promise to someone you love. You keep it every single day until the day you can't anymore. And even then it keeps going. Through every door you open, through every person you fed, through every kid who got a chance. The promise doesn't die, it multiplies. That's what Ray knew. That's what Victor learned. And that's what Maggie Dalton proved. One night, one door, one bowl of soup at a time.